Relations and functions, domain and range. Let's do a quick overview about domain and range from Algebra 1, because you did learn this in Algebra 1. Domain represents all of your x values on a graph. Range represents all of your y values on a graph. And there are two notations that you're going to use. One is called interval notation, and that's when we're going to be using parentheses and brackets. The other is inequality notation, which is where you're mainly going to be using either a less than or a less than or equal to symbol. So, looking at this graph, it goes from -2, it starts, and then for x values, it stops at +4. There's no part of the graph that goes after 4. There's no part of the graph that starts before -2. So, describing my domain of this in inequality notation, I would say my endpoints are -2 and 4. And all of the x values fall in between that. Again, I'm describing domain here. Now this is where I have to realize what symbol to use. Most likely than not, you're always going to use a less than. So I'm going to put these x's over the greater than symbols, because you won't really need them. So if I have my less thans, do I need a less than or equal to, one that has the line under, or just a less than sign? That all depends on the graph. If we look at -2, there is a closed circle. So if there is a closed circle, I need a less than or equal to. So I have -2, less than or equal to, x. 4 has just a less than sign, because at 4, there's an open circle, which means I just need the less than sign. That is an example of inequality notation. The other way you'll have it is interval notation, which I have down here. This is interval. Interval notation is going to use either parentheses or brackets. So the numbers are still the same for the domain. This graph goes from -2 to 4. -2 has a bracket because of the closed circle. So closed circles always get brackets. 4 has a parenthesis because of the open circle. Now you get to pick which way you want to write your domain. You can either use inequality or you can use interval. Sometimes the directions will tell you to use a certain way, so then you have to. I will most likely be using interval as the year goes on, but you can choose whichever way you like. So now we're going to do 6 practice problems. So we're going to practice domain and range, and I'm going to do inequality and interval for both. So again, domain are my x values. So this graph for my x goes from -4, and this is +1. I know it's hard to see, but this is +1. So if I'm writing my inequality, I know it's -4. I know I have less than symbols. And then it goes to +1. Domain is my x value. Now, I have to choose, am I using equal to signs for both of these, or one of these? So let me erase my lines here. At -4, it is a closed circle, so it is an equal to. And then at 1, it is also a closed circle, so it is an equal to. That's your inequality notation. Now, if I want to write interval notation, I'm still using -4, comma, 1, because the graph goes from -4 to 1. Because both are closed circles, both get brackets. Now, let's talk range. Range are my y values. So how high does the graph go? and how low does the graph go. So I've used green lines there to kind of mark it off for you. All right, so the highest point it goes to is this point up here, which is at the y value of 3. And the lowest point is down here, which is a y value of -1. So we're always going to do the low point first. So -1. I'm going to put my less than signs, my high point 3. And the middle here is y. At -1, I have a closed circle, so I get an equal to. 3, there's not an actual closed circle there, but the point does touch. It does exist. So that's also going to give me an equal to symbol. Now for inequality, we're going to use the same numbers, -1, comma, 3, and I started to write the brackets because we used equal tos and points actually exist. Again, you do not have to write both ways. You can pick whichever way you want. I am showing both ways at first here. All right, let's look at number 2. So let's start with domain. Domain are my x values. So looking down left and right, looks like the farthest left and then the farthest right. So the farthest left is -3. My less than signs. Farthest right is +2. Domain are x values. So I'm going to erase my line so we can see the dots. So at -3, we have a closed circle, so it is an equal to. And then at 2, it is an open circle, so we can just leave it. Now if I wanted to write interval, I would say -3, comma, 2. -3 would get a bracket, 2, parenthesis. Now let's talk about range. I'm going to get my green arrows out again. So that's as far down as the graph will go. And this is the highest point the graph will go. So the farthest down this graph touches is at this point here, and that is -1. So that's the lowest is -1. Put my less than signs, the letter y because it's range. The highest it goes is a y value at 3. Now at -1, the graph does touch that point. So it is an equal to. 3, the graph also touches that point, and it's closed. So another equal to. Then if I wanted to write interval, I would be -1, comma, 3. Both would get brackets. Again, you don't have to write both versions. You can pick which one you like. All right, now we're going to try these. Number 3, I'm just going to do interval notation. So first, starting with the domain. Let me get some lines here. So how far left does it go? And how far right does it go? So the farthest left this point touches looks to be -6. I know it's hard for you to see, but it's -6. And then I need to move my line, and then +8 is the farthest right it goes, +8. So interval notation, I would say -6, comma, 8. Then I'm going to move my lines to make sure, okay, I have a closed circle. Whoops. And then I have a closed circle. Okay, so since both are closed circles, we get brackets. Now let me delete these lines real quick. Okay, now let's do the range. So I'm going to get my green lines back out for the range. How far down does this graph go? Looks like there. And the highest it touches looks like here. Okay, so the farthest down, the y number that hits looks to be -2, and the highest up it goes is +2. So interval notation, I would say -2, 2. Because the graph actually touches at those points, we would use brackets. Okay? So now, number 4, I'm going to use inequality notation. So again, let's look at my domain first. So the farthest left, the farthest right. So the farthest left, this goes is negative, sorry, I've got to move the line again. No, that's the graph. Looks like -5, and then 10 on the right. So this is -5, this is 10. So inequality, I would say -5, my less than sign, x, less than 10. Now I'm going to delete my pink lines on the graph just so I can see if I'm dealing with a closed circle or an open circle. So at -5, I have a closed circle, which means I need the equal to. 10, I have the open circle, so I can just leave it. Same with the range. I'm going to get my green lines, so we have those. So this is the farthest down the graph goes. This is the farthest up the graph goes. So the farthest down, the number looks to be -3. And the farthest up, 1, 2, is +3. So we would say -3 less than y less than +3. At -3, we do have a closed circle, so an equal to sign. And at +3, we have this open circle, so we can just leave it. Okay, we've got 2 more to go through. Okay, on these last 2, I'm going to use interval notation for both. So looking at this first one, my domain, the farthest left, this goes, looks like this point here, which is -4. Farthest right, this goes, and it looks like +8. So interval notation, I would say -4, comma, 8. Points exist at those, so I can give them brackets. Range, how far down and how far up. So -6, this looks like -7 far down, and then 5 for up. So we would say -7, comma, 5. Both points exist, so we would have brackets. All right, number 6 is very important, so if you zoned out, zone back in here. Domain is saying how far left and how far right. Well, since we have these arrows, that means it's going to continue to go left forever, and it's going to continue to go right forever. And the symbol that we use for forever is infinity. It's a sideways 8. It could be a negative infinity, or it could be a positive infinity. So if this graph is going to go to the left forever, remember left are my negative numbers, we would say negative infinity, comma. This graph is also going to go to the right forever. To the right is positive numbers, so we would say positive infinity. Now infinity is something you can never touch, so infinities always get parentheses. Domain is still up and down, so how far down does this graph go? Goes down to here, which is at -3. Then it is going to go up forever because of these arrows. So the farthest down is -3, comma, Up forever, since it's going to positive numbers forever, we would say positive infinity. -3 has an actual point there, so we would get a bracket. Infinity you can't touch, so you get a parenthesis. And that is just a quick overview and reminder of what domain and range are. The one thing we did not go through were functions and relations. Those are going to be in your Desmos activity. Let me do that really quickly. So a couple things with relations and functions. So functions, something is considered a function if the x value does not repeat. So you could have a table and you could have -2, 0, 3, 1, 5, 1. This would be considered a function because my x values don't repeat. If I had a table that said -2, 0, -2, 1, 3, 1, this is not a function because the x values repeat. If we had a graph, oh, sorry, let me try that again. If we had something that was graphed like this, we could use a vertical line test. So let me get my vertical line. As I take this vertical line and move it through the graph, since it touches twice, that means it is not a function. So a vertical line test should be a familiar thing. You did learn that in Algebra 1, but I did want to give you a quick recap with functions and relations because that is going to be in your classwork and in your homework. If you have questions, come see me on Monday at office hours.